Hello London, we are ready for your vote.
Hello, I'm Stephen Perkins, and this is Douze Points, the Eurovision podcast from the team behind Binge Watch. It's been a while since we've released a new episode. We took a bit of time off to recuperate after the 2024 contest, and, in all honesty, after everything that happened in Malmö back in May, we've spent a fair bit of that time evaluating our relationship with this contest and what the future looks like for this podcast. It goes without saying that we're still here, for now at least, and in the near future we will be dedicating an episode to what we're going to be doing from here on. But before we get too bogged down in all of that, I thought it made sense for the first episode back after the break to be a look at what's been happening in the world of Eurovision while we've been away. So let's start with the big stuff. There were a lot of questions to be answered in the wake of the 2024 contest, not least in terms of the safety of the artists, crew and media teams working backstage. We know that Serbia and Slovenia stated that they would be making complaints to the EBU, and that the Portugal delegation, backed up by others including France, Spain, Norway and Croatia, reached out to the EBU for clarification regarding the events that happened at this year's contest. The EBU responded in June by commissioning an independent investigation, a move that was met with a degree of cynicism. Mostly by those of us who've been around long enough to know that Eurovision is strange and impenetrable, and generally not great at identifying its own failings, no matter how much outside help it gets. The investigation was carried out at some degree of speed, and the EBU released its findings on the 1st of July. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing here, because absolutely nobody is coming to this podcast to hear me read a load of dry legalese, and I'm sure you would all call me out for the shameless episode padding it would undoubtedly be. So, I'm going to put the link in the episode description if you want to read the findings in full, and I will do my best to summarise it here. The investigation was carried out by a leading industry expert. Given their independent status, I don't think it was Linda Woodruff, but I'm not ruling it out, who consulted with heads of delegation, members of the contest reference group, the governing board, and the core team of the EBU and the Eurovision Song Contest itself. Essentially, the review found that there are undoubtedly challenges that come with an annual event the scale of Eurovision, and the EBU appointed a task force of senior leaders to oversee decision-making across the coming months. The review identified a need for a new role to be created, that of Eurovision Song Contest Director, reporting to the Media Director and Deputy Director General of the EBU, which would take some of the work off the Executive Supervisor's plate and frees them up to focus on the production itself and managing delegate relationships. 3 areas were also identified as needing strengthening and improvement: governance and participation, safety and risk management, and the rather confusing sounding ensuring a general audience show and broad engagement. Essentially, the first of these is about clarifying which of the governing bodies is responsible for decision-making in given areas, and ensuring that the voices of member broadcasters are properly heard. The second is about improving understanding of the rules and improving the contest's crisis management protocols, as well as its security needs, vital given how both of these were found somewhat wanting in Malmö. And the third one, something about values, which seems to involve just getting more influencers on board as far as I can tell. All we can really do at this point is adopt a wait-and-see approach to see if any of these fancy words actually lead to tangible change within the competition itself. Personally, I'm not filled with confidence. So much of what went wrong in 2024 seemed to be about the rules not being enforced equitably, and the very visible discontent from those delegations who felt they were being disadvantaged. While I can appreciate from a corporate PR speak they probably don't want to dwell on the absolute mess backstage at Malmö, this statement seems to downplay it in a way that kind of concerns me. It seems to think it can fix the problem with more executives and meetings rather than actively acknowledging the things that went wrong and addressing how they will specifically work not to let them happen again. We won't really know if any of this actually works until Eurovision 2025, and therein kind of lies the problem. The contest as a whole can survive a PR disaster like 2024 was, but what it can't afford is for 2024 to become the new normal, and if we end up with similar tensions and controversy in 2025, then we might be too late to course correct at that point. And that, in a roundabout way, brings us to the next item of news, which is that Martin Österdahl will be remaining in place as the contest executive supervisor. I think it's fair to say that in 2024, Österdahl, to borrow a bit of football parlance, lost the dressing room given the way that he was audibly booed in the arena, so if there was to be a high-profile resignation in the wake of the contest, his would have been the most likely. However, he is remaining in place for now, albeit with his job description somewhat altered as we've just established. Back in July, Österdahl gave an interview to the Swedish news agency TT, where he admitted that the situation in the Middle East, presumably an oblique reference to Israel's participation in the contest, is very complicated and something that actual world leaders are struggling to navigate successfully, so it's no surprise that Eurovision has made a few stumbles as well. He added that he didn't have a concrete solution, but the focus was to be on making the decision-making mandate clearer in the future and improving communication throughout the process between Eurovision and its heads of delegation. He also addressed the booing that he received in 2024 at the grand final and said that he didn't mind being the outlet for fans' frustrations as long as everyone got through the contest unscathed. Now, we can debate the unscathed part of that until the cows come home, but essentially his comments are much in line with the EBU's press release. It seems that everyone's approach is to fix Eurovision by focusing on communication, which does seem to me to be a slightly airy and vague premise that doesn't really address a lot of the frustrations that were being felt this year. After all, it wasn't that people didn't understand the decision-making process, it was that they fundamentally disagreed with the decisions that were being made. However, Martin Østerdal has said that they are committed to making improvements throughout the summer and autumn, so for now all we can really do is wait, remain vigilant, and hope that some lessons have actually been learnt. Okay, that's enough dwelling on 2024 for now. Let's take a look to the future. The main big story while we've been away, from a UK perspective at least, is that the BBC has announced it will not be participating in Junior Eurovision this year. We returned to the contest in 2022 after a 17-year gap and had some pretty decent results. Freya Sky finished 5th in 2022 with Lose My Head, winning the online vote, and Stand Unique went one better in 2023, finishing in 4th place. However, the UK's coverage moved from BBC One in 2022 to BBC Two in 2023, so we can probably assume that the viewing figures for the contest in the UK have been a little bit disappointing for the BBC. Also, children's television as an industry is in a pretty tough spot right now, and the BBC is not exempted from that, with tough decisions having to be made, so I imagine it came down to Junior Eurovision being an expense that they couldn't really justify. Something that a lot of withdrawing countries have cited, given that the contest takes place on Sunday afternoons, where you can't generally expect the sort of ratings that you would get for Saturday night prime time. It is a shame that we're not participating again this year, because I think our involvement over the last 2 years was part of a general commitment on the part of the BBC to really putting the effort into Eurovision in a way that we haven't been doing for some time, and both of our songs that we entered were pretty good. However, and this is entirely speculation on my part, given that we've gone back to getting fairly disappointing results at the main event, maybe the BBC feels that it doesn't really need the distraction of a second competition, and that it might be a better use of everyone's resources if the songwriting talent is focused entirely on grown-up Eurovision. I have heard whispers, entirely unsubstantiated I should add, that the BBC might be looking at organising national finals again to choose our Eurovision entry, and if that is the case, it would make sense that they want a strong crop of songs for the shortlist, so maybe they want the British music industry's focus on that as far as Eurovision is concerned. For now, though, we are out of Junior Eurovision again, though of course UK viewers will still be able to watch it live on the contest website and will still be able to vote online, so essentially not much is changing for viewers except that it won't be on the BBC anymore. Looking ahead to the 2025 contest, it looks as though we'll be welcoming Montenegro back to Eurovision. The Balkan state last participated in 2022 when Vladana failed to qualify for the final with Breathe, finishing 17th out of 18 in the second semi-final. They've missed the last 2 competitions, citing a mixture of financial issues and their generally poor results at the contest. They haven't qualified for the final since Knez made it to 13th place in 2015 with Adio, but Montenegrin broadcaster RTCG has announced plans for Montesong 2024, which seems likely to be their selection process for their 2025 entry. This seems like as good a time as any to check which countries have confirmed their participation for 2025. As it stands, there are 25 countries who have stated their intention to compete next year: Albania, Australia, Azerbaijan, Belgium, Croatia, Cyprus, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Israel, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, Montenegro, Norway, Portugal, San Marino, Serbia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. We can expect more countries to confirm in due course. However, one country we probably shouldn't expect to see in 2025 the way things are going is the Netherlands. They of course were disqualified from the grand final in 2024 following the backstage incident between Joost Klein and a member of the crew, and Dutch broadcaster Afrotros have stated that they are seeking structural adjustments to the competition, given what they believe was unfair treatment of their representative this year. Apparently they will be making a firm decision in September, but they have indicated that, in the current circumstances, the chances of them making a return are slim. This will be an interesting test for Eurovision. It's reported that the Netherlands is one of the major financial contributors to the contest, and may even be the biggest contributor of all the non-Big Five countries, so its absence would be a major blow, and could have a knock-on effect elsewhere. If other countries are forced to pick up the financial slack, this could mean that some smaller nations, who can only just scrape together the budget to compete at Eurovision, may be pushed out. However, this is all speculation for now. We will have to wait and see. Finally, we can expect an announcement this month regarding the host city for 2025. Following Switzerland's win earlier this year, 5 cities expressed an interest in hosting: Basel, Bern, Geneva, St Gallen and Zurich, although St Gallen later withdrew after determining that they could not meet the infrastructure requirements to host Eurovision and their bid was unlikely to be successful. In July, representatives from the Swiss Broadcasting Corporation visited each of the prospective host cities and later announced that Basel and Geneva had made the final shortlist. The official host city announcement is due to be made on 30th of August, but whichever city wins, we will be extending the record-setting unbroken run of contests held outside of capital cities. The contest hasn't been held in the capital since Lisbon in 2018, and with Tel Aviv, Rotterdam, Turin, Liverpool and Malmö having hosted since then, this will be the 6th year running that Eurovision takes place away from its host nation's capital. For those interested, the longest run prior to that was right at the beginning of the contest, a 4-year run from 1956 to 1959, with the events being held in Lugano, Frankfurt, Hilversum and Cannes before the 1960 contest took place in London. That's it for this episode. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back in 2 weeks, but in the meantime, don't forget that you can follow us on Twitter at Stephen Perkins and at bingewatch_pod. If you feel so inclined, it would be great if you could leave us a complimentary review on your podcast platform of choice, and don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. Until next time, good night Europe, and good morning Australia.